Hey guys, so we're here with the underpainting for that Lion King painting, which I've already posted the background on. Honestly, I can't say that the background looks all that bad, but underpainting is really, to me, rather boring. There's nothing really very technical about it. It's basically color matching with lines versus your reference picture. So if anybody wants to watch me do this, you can feel free to kind of follow along. Color palette is as such. So we have yellow oxide, raw sienna, burnt umber, raw umber, the titanium white, ultramarine blue, Mars black, and the unbleached titanium white. Of course, these are all Liquitex colors. So no big surprise there, but narrating underpainting is something more boring than narrating how paint dries. So I'm going to take the opportunity to answer some questions, and hopefully that will be slightly more intriguing than, like, almost paint by number. So one of the questions that I've got was, what inspires me? And forgive me, but I've actually had to type all this out so I would stay on point. So with the first question being, what inspires me? What inspires me and what drives me are two different things. What inspires me is doing things that I haven't seen done. Taxidermy quality dragons, it would be a good example. People love fantasy creatures and love dragons, but very rarely do you see a dragon done in such a serious style that it's anything less than comic relief of what the mythology of a dragon actually is. The subject as a whole I don't think has been taken seriously in a 3D format, and I find that really a shame. I also get inspired by giving examples of how to improve on a design or give my take on a different version of the same concept. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do a Lion King painting, because so far I've been unhappy with what I've seen in online trailers and artwork. Honestly, taking a lion and just giving it a black mane and it looks like Aslan and I can't tell the difference. I think Disney could do better. Dude, I'm one lonely artist. Raise the bar. When I think of something in my head that I haven't seen done and I think somebody would enjoy, I will make that. That will inspire me and to get me to do that. I can narrate stories at work and people find them very entertaining. At the end of the day, a lot of people enjoy looking at my artwork. So when I find a concept or an idea or a subject and I think that I can do it and people would enjoy it, because I haven't seen it before, that will inspire me to continue to do it. If I think somebody would just enjoy, like, something that's absolutely ridiculous, I'll do that too. On a more serious note, another thing that I find inspiring is helping a hurting heart. Several years ago I started taking commissions when the owner of a cat who had recently been put to sleep came up and tearfully asked me to fix the best picture of her that she had, which was a 4x6 faded colored picture of her cat sitting in the window, and every day for years when she came home her cat had been in the window waiting for her. It was a hard reference picture to work from, and I reluctantly did, but as I was working on it, she shared dozens of stories with me about her and her cat and stories of this cat, and it helped me push through when the commission got really hard because the reference picture wasn't the greatest. And when I gave it to her and the final piece was done, this woman literally broke down and she wept. The only words she could muster was that it's like she was home again. And that day she shared her stories with others at this cat show, and I watched as I saw from my own eyes the power that art has to heal. And so when I take clients, to me it's more important the stories and the relationships that my clients share with their pets. And when they've lost pets and they're asking for portraits, my driving factor and my inspiration comes from that heartfelt road and this like lifetime of companionship that this piece of artwork is there to commemorate. When doing commissions, to me, it's always been more about honoring that relationship than creating the perfect piece of artwork. And I draw out the emotion in that scenario and those relationships and stories that gets me through the hours to get through these portraits. Recently, I did state on Facebook that I was no longer taking portraits, and that was because the last several commissions that I've had were more about the status quo of having a commission of a pet done. People just asking for portraits with and being very disrespectful about their pets, and having very horrible stories about pets and their relationship with their pets and their perspective of their pets. And it did the exact opposite of what I normally feed on when I'm doing a commission, which is why I did say that I was not taking commissions anymore. But it's entirely possible that there would be a client out there somewhere that needs a commission done, and it would be for the right reasons. So another question was, what drives you? Now, being driven to do something and inspired to do something are two totally different things to me. To me, inspiration is what gets you to start doing something. That driving force, what drives you to complete something, is something completely different. Mostly, what drives me is feeling as though I make a difference. My 9-to-5 job is fast food. It's exhausting. It's an underrated 50-hour week in which I get to see the best and the worst of people. Every day is different. It brings new challenges. It's grueling. It can be dangerous, disgusting, messy, exhausting, challenging, funny, but it's never boring. My job is more than just flipping burgers, which so many people don't understand, including friends who I've had for 15 to 20 years. Fast food is an underrated, underpaid, entry-level job that is held by thousands of people every day all over the world. People with kids who struggle to make ends meet, people who struggle with addiction issues or issues with authority, kids whose first experience with a job is going to be under my watch and my guidance and my supervision, people who walk into my restaurant from all walks of life being customers, having a good day or a bad, and I face the challenge of getting me and my staff to rise to meet all of their expectations with understanding. But I come from an old school attitude of work hard to get to your goal, so it's frustrating to deal with this new millennial attitude that involves milking the system to get by, and it makes it hard to push through a grueling 2 hours where your customers will deal you 1,000 levels of criticism and not understanding about service while you're going into the 14th hour of your shift and you stopped getting paid 4 hours ago. But you stay because you know your coworkers need you. You have to show them that this push isn't going to end them and it isn't going to end you. I go home physically aching from too many hours running a floor, from hours of scrubbing dishes and stocking boxes and food and setting up the next shift. I go home emotionally spent from trying to please hundreds of people, and some of them are just unsuccessful. That's why I don't post content as often as I could, because sometimes I just need to recharge. It's not uncommon for my scheduled 50-hour week to easily hit 70 or 80 hours in only 2 or 3 days. When it comes to this channel, though, it gets a little bit more complicated. But there are dozens of art channels out there on YouTube, and often many of them have a huge following compared to mine. I never really studied the art of creating a narrative with film, and I can tell a good story while in the company of others, and I love to make people laugh. I love to teach. but more than just the technical aspects. How to do something does not engage me as much as why you should do something. But many artists don't know anything about their subjects. They don't know things like anatomy or perspective. They're unclear as to how to make a narrative out of a single framed image. In artworks that I've made, like plotting, the challenge was to take what I think ferrets would dream about and make that a visible, pleasing way to the viewer. So the best way I could figure that out is to have the ferrets sleeping with this stained glass image behind them and do kind of a play on words like the ferrets were dreaming of getting into these planters. On a piece like Anubis, the overall challenge was to have it be intriguing enough and hold your attention enough that you don't even realize what's wrong with the image that would make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And when it does, if you follow Egyptian mythology, there's been a couple of people that have looked at that painting, follow Egyptian mythology, figure it out, and then just watch their blood run cold. It's kind of fun, that shock and awe. It's the same thing with Morocco. You know, it was the whole, I want people to have this image that I daydream about and be able to convey that. If I can take a mundane subject and not only intrigue the viewer, but make them think about it in more ways than just the technical terms of brushstroke or color palette, hey man, it's been a good day. My making video started with the request of technical aspects of how to do something. And mostly it was cats. But what I found out by the responses in the comments of those videos, that many artists have limited access to certain subjects. As silly as it is, cats is a good example. As fast as I posted a short hair video, somebody wanted a 3/4 head view. And then there was a request for a long haired video. Because how do you make long hair seem soft? 2 years ago, I decided to split my one channel, which shared my ferret videos with my art videos, and separate my art into its own channel and give it its own life. I was inspired by the achievements of artists like Lisa Lackery, and I thought I could build up a fan base that would want to see and hear what I have to offer. But I have a lot to learn about video formats and editing YouTube videos and social media, and I'll be honest, I have a lot to room to grow because frankly there aren't enough hours in a day, but I am trying to find the balance between content and a paycheck. And sadly, I admit, I have turned into one of those people that has simply prioritized by watching numbers. If I post a video and no one watches or responds, but my lack of being at work causes number there to drop, people to quit, morale to fall, I will prioritize my 9-to-5 job over this channel. But I still want to make content. I think I still have something to offer. I have yet to see a channel that provides an artist with the technical aspects of executing their subject while informing them about their subjects, whether it's anatomy, perspective, behavior, or content. Wait a minute, be right back. God, I have to run to work.
4 hours later.
Okay, I forgot what we were talking about, so I'm just going to pick up on the next question. So on the concept of art, what do you hate? I'm not a fan of modern art. I'm not a fan of art for the sake of being outrageous or disgusting or offensive. And I hate lazy art. I once went to the Milwaukee Art Museum and saw 3 stretched panels, and each one was a different color. Like it had been painted with a paint roller. And that's what I mean by lazy art. And no, I hate it. No. In art, what do you love? I love art that makes you think. I recently shared an artwork by Cuban artist named Eric Ravallo titled The Untouchables. and I found it really made a statement about modern society, without being crass or disgusting in such a way as to be profound and meaningful. I love art that's well executed. Wildlife work where you can tell the artist knows their subject, and they know their media. I have the wonderful privilege of being acquainted with some wonderful artists via Facebook. Kathy Sheeter is a phenomenal scratchboard artist. Lisa Lackery is a wonderful pet and wildlife artist that has an incredibly successful YouTube channel. Karen Shippers is a great equine photographer who hosts workshops for photographers looking to refine their craft out in Colorado. And Paul Reimer, who does a fantastic job on large sculptures of wildlife and has the astounding credit of being able to work with such well-established institutions such as the Smithsonian. What do I work on? Oh, wait. What do I do while I'm working on my art? I have seen video and it looks like you're talking, but it's time-lapsed, so I don't know. I sing a lot. I love music. I play a bit of guitar and a bit of piano, but since both of those take me physically away from using my hands while I work on my art, I play music either on Pandora or YouTube, and I sing to pass the time. I listen to all kinds of music, save for an excessive amount of rap. I'm not really big into gospel or polka. In fact, when I got married, I banned polka from being played at my wedding. But I've also been known to watch a few shows or movies that inspire me and keep going. So, like when I was working on The Lion King, I was watching The Lion King. Or I was listening to Rhythm of the Pride Lands. But usually if I'm watching movies, it's stuff that I've already seen before. Somebody asked me what the name of my channel means. Okay, so Morning Hawk Creations. I used to do, many years ago, right after I graduated from high school, living history events. And specifically in Wisconsin, it would have been the French-Indian War reenactments. So that was right outside of high school. And to give you a little bit of backstory about the event that happened at this living history event, through many years of research and talking to falconers, when I lived in Grafton with my parents, there was a red-tailed hawk that would come up to the bird feeders, and we always thought that he was trying to eat the squirrels, but he became very familiar with my parents and with myself. Not so much with my sisters, because the three of us spent more time outside than my sisters ever did. My sisters were very much into their social thing. So my mother affectionately named this big hawk Red, because he was a red-tailed hawk. And Red would frequently be found out on the railing right outside of my parents' dining room. And when I would walk out in the woods, he could frequently be seen walking behind me. And I found out later it was because as I was walking through the fields or whatever, is that it's something similar to what falconers do when they scare out mice. And then the hawks or whatever birds of prey they're using would go down and they would eat the mice. And apparently in walking around as I would normally do, Red would find a good bit of food following me around, so he became very attached to me, my father, and my mother. So much so that on more than one occasion it wouldn't be unusual if I had not been outside, either because the weather was bad or because I had school or some other events, or my dad was off in Montana hunting, or my mother had been under the weather, that if I had gone outside, nobody had gone out walking in the woods for a while, that he would get particularly aggravated if all we were doing is basically running down and getting the mail. One point would be at which he actually landed on the car that I was designated to drive. I had to go to college, and he perched himself up on the luggage rack and started talking and chattering at me, and I was late for class, so I could not stop and go walk to help him hunt. And so he wound up following me for something close to a quarter mile. And it's very, very strange to be driving a vehicle with a hawk following your vehicle, overtaking your vehicle, and then flying at the hood, and you get to see the tail end of a hawk. While you're driving, it's exceptionally distracting. But while I had been living with my parents at the end of the year had a falling out with me, and I moved out with very little or no announcement. And where I moved was like 1 or 2 towns over, and in between there was a living history reenactment, and I can only think that it was actually the very same hawk that had been living with my parents. I don't know how he found me at this in particular event, or why he was at this particular event. But I was camping overnight at this event, and I had woke up Saturday morning to talk outside of my tent and outside of our lodge of people talking, and, oh my god, why is he there, blah, blah, blah. People just, it was quiet tones, but the tone was very much a lot of concern. And when Dave and I got up, and we went out, and it was like 6 in the morning, I went out and found like 10 or 15 people on the opposite side of the walkway, looking at a wall tent, and sitting on top the pole of this wall tent was Red. So there's this red-tailed hawk in the middle of this large encampment of people and smoke and everything else that would scare a wild animal. And he's just perched up there, just kind of like chilling. And it really had grasped the concept of the attention of everybody there. And so I walked out and I saw him and I was like, Red, and I thought maybe there had been a falconer there, but nobody knew about a falconer being there, and so I was like, well, it's gotta be my hawk. So I was like, hey, Red, go home. And everybody was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh, this is Red, this is my mother's hawk. Go home, Red. And he would hop down the pole a little bit, he would squawk a little bit, you know, and he wouldn't let anybody touch him. But I was like, you know what, he'll just get bored and he'll go home. Because we're only like a few miles from my parents' house. And so I started walking to the main tent to go get food and get breakfast and to use the porta potty. And Red kind of followed me. And this is not something unusual to me, because I'm used to this. This is how Red would go hunting. I found out later that basically he must have been a falconer's hawk that was let go and abandoned, and so he really didn't have a concept of how to hunt on his own, so he used me to scare up prey. And so he had learned that wherever I went, food went, and so he's slowly following me, trying to get food. And this little group of 5 or 10 people turns into half the encampment because I would stop and people would say, that's the coolest thing ever. And I would turn around and Red would land, or Red would hover and kind of just circle a little bit, and then he'd land and squawk a little bit, and I would go, Red, go home. Red, go home. And this went on for the better part of the morning. And it went up until about 10, 11 o'clock in the afternoon when the first battle reenactment came about and the first 12-pound cannon went off, and that was enough to make him go, you know what, not worth it. I don't know, I'm not getting food, but that's a really loud explosion. But until then, he spent 3 or 4 hours just following me around the encampment, hoping to God that I would go down in the embankment, maybe scare a mouse out of the encampment, but there were so many people there, even if I did entertain his thought of we could go hunting, there wouldn't be any place I could go in the encampment where there was probably a mouse, because there were people everywhere. And so, since my character was a Native American Lakota, I got the name of Morning Hawk because I literally walked around all morning having a discussion with my hawk about how we were not hunting this morning. But Red was not... Red would have followed me around, but Red was not acclimated enough to take, like, raw meat out of anybody's hand, or even mine. But he did demand that I take him hunting. I think since then he had learned how to hunt, but he became much more wary of people after that. But yeah, that's how I got my company name, because it was just one of those really great stories that kind of carried through over the time. And so then when I had the option of making a company instead of calling it, you know, Artwork by Alicia McNally, I went back to that and was like, that's a really cool kind of thing, and that's got a good story with it. So I don't really talk about it that often because people think I'm full of it. Okay, so another question was about sending progression pictures to clients, and that actually came from the Networking for Pet Portrait group. And there's some mixed feelings on that. I have typically kept my clients updated on progression pictures because the last thing I want to do is ship a picture out and then the client is unhappy because it doesn't look like anything of what they were expecting, or the background doesn't look like anything that they were expecting. And I just don't want to get nailed with this last minute, very upset customer. Some artists feel that it just takes away from the surprise of seeing the last piece, and some artists feel that in doing that you're just kind of making everything more complicated because a client who's hired you as an artist doesn't understand the artistic process like it's a mystery, and therefore will constantly be confused. I try to give my clients quite a bit more credit than that. Maybe it's unfair, but I have always kind of kept my clients up to date with how portraits are going. And for those clients that needed to commission me for something that was like a surprise gift, I opened up a group on Facebook for secret commissions, so that if they wanted to keep up to date rather than emailing back and forth, because some companies share email accounts, and oftentimes families share one home computer. That way they can make sure it's an absolute surprise. The group would have been a secret group. It's just been disbanded because honestly I haven't had a quote-unquote secret commission in several years. And honestly, after the last several commissions, I don't think I'm going to be taking any more commissions. It's going to have to be something that is really going to have to be petitioned by the client before I would take another commission. So there's not really a need for me to have a quote-unquote secret group for commissions and progression pictures. But I subscribe to the whole school of letting clients kind of keep up on how much work you're doing on their piece so that they don't think that you're basically just milking them for time and money. Or worse, people who think that you're not working on their artwork at all. Alright. Alright, this was a discussion that came up again in that Networking for Pet Portraits group. And it was a discussion about the importance of using client pictures for reference material. So, at some point, the conversation did turn into a copyright discussion. And if you watched parts of my vlog or you've watched my photography tutorials, I am a huge fan, and I don't care how many people want to hate on me for it, of doing my own reference pictures. I would far prefer me using my own reference pictures than getting into some nitpicky back and forth with either a client or a customer or somebody else about whether or not there's a copyright infringement if I decide I want to use those pictures elsewhere. So, like I did the vlog post about how I was going to be doing this Lion King painting, the only part of this is actually like near a copyright issue is the fact that Scar, I'm sure, is a trademarked name by now by Disney, and so is Simba and all the characters. But the pictures that I'm using as reference pictures for this painting are my own pictures. I did use sample shots and screenshots and sound bites from the Disney version and the Disney Lion King movie when I was doing the vlog entry, and I'm avoiding doing that like the plague unless I really need to come back and make reference to those particular aspects. And I think that kind of goes back and forth with when you're using your client's reference pictures. So the copyright law, which apparently there's been some gray area. There's always gray area when it comes to the law. But apparently somewhere in there, some misunderstandings have come along, and people have decided that if a client gives me a picture that they take and then I paint it, I suddenly own the copyright on the reference picture, and that's not true. Again, that's one of the reasons why in the last several years I've been really hot to trot about making sure I have my own pictures and my own reference pictures rather than using somebody else's, because I don't want to get into a tit for tat about copyright infringement. Because if effectively you're using their reference picture and you want to put samples of your work with their reference picture, they can come after you for unlawful use of copyright or copyright infringement. Now, you can get away from it and get around it by using a contract and saying that you have explicit rights for displaying your work, and effectively you have to have somebody sign off on the copyright use for display for your work and their reference picture without claiming. You'd have to word it very, very specifically, because you don't want to say suddenly that now that you've made use of their reference picture, you now own their reference picture as copyright. And that's not true. If I were to, and this has actually happened to me. Somebody actually took a chipmunk picture that I took up at Bay Beach, and they asked to do it for, specifically they asked to do a pastel rendering of that picture for a pastel class, and then they later sold that pastel for profit, and they claimed that they had the copyright on the reference picture, and I was not at all happy about that. Especially since I had the reference picture that she used up for sale on FAA, which is Fine Art America, and it would have gotten into an awful lot of ugliness between the two of us, and she tried convincing me that she didn't really sell it for a profit, and she didn't really do that, except that I had been given a you know, transcription of a conversation between her and somebody else and some bogus story that she made up. And needless to say, that cost a friendship. And I have since had not been very fond of this person, although I do keep tabs on them, and she has not pulled it again. But I would be begrudging to say that I did not get offended when it did happen. So if for some reason you're using your client's reference picture that they've taken, please do not think that by using that, that suddenly gives you access to their copyrightability on their work. Alright guys, so we're just wrapping up this section of video, and we're pretty much done with all the Q&A. If you guys have any more questions for me, you know, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll get to them on the next section of Underpainting, which is going to be Simba's half. I do apologize, there was actually a little bit more underpainting that I did on this than is being shown, and that's because, well, my regular 32 gig memory card was acting up and I had to reformat it, and in the meantime I was using a 2 gig memory card and it did not record as much as I'm used to it recording, and so the memory card had filled up and my camera is not set in such a way that it makes noise when it stops recording. So I kept painting just a little bit more on this than I have recorded. But if you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, as I said, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot.